I'm really excited for this webinar. Thank you so much to Cynthia Molina for putting a really exciting panel together. We can just go through a couple of housekeeping ideas. That your audio and mic will be disabled at the moment, but for the Q&A later, yeah, you can join in and ask your questions. That will be a 20-minute discussion at the end. The speakers have also mentioned today that it might be nice to turn on captions. So you can actually do that by following this. Oh, Vera has just posted in the chat about how to turn on these live captions. It might be a nice aid. We're a very multilingual webinar today, so we're really appreciative of all our speakers coming here and speaking in English today. So thank you very much. As a brief introduction to the Earth System Governance Project, I see names coming in that have participated in conferences before or working groups and task forces. But for those of you who are not familiar, we're a research network and we're working on governance and global environmental change. So today, of course, climate governance, but the research network works in an interdisciplinary way in all kinds of environmental and climate governance. What we do is we aim to explore political solutions and novel, more effective governance systems to cope with global environmental change. And how we do that, we have a small team of employees. There's 3 of us, and we have a scientific steering committee who lead the research since 2008. But we basically want to expand the global mobilization of researchers in this field of Earth system governance. We want to kind of stimulate and facilitate more research collaboration between researchers across the globe. And we want to maintain this vibrant community of research. We do this with an annual conference. Our annual conference is in 2 or 1 month's time, almost. So we're very excited for that, and online attendance is still possible. So if you go to our website, earthsystemgovernance.org, the 2023 Radboud conference will be accessible hybrid this year. So I really encourage all of you, if you are interested in the field, to come and join in our panels. And finally, we aim to inform and advise at the Science Policy Interface. Since 2008, the Earth System Governance Project has engaged in various ways at UN level as an observer, and we really encourage scholars to come together in order to empower each other to provide evidence-based research at a policy level. Finally, the South-South initiative is what this webinar falls under today. It was an initiative started by members of our scientific steering committee. Cristina Inoue from Research Center Brasilia was really launching it up, and it's really just to increase research exchanges, address more regionally relevant topics, and strengthen the network across various countries. And today we're doing a webinar, which is one of the initiative's aims, but we also will have a day-long conference at the conference, a day-long session at the conference dedicated to the South-South dialogues, as well as a special issue at the Earth System Governance Journal on issues relating to the so-called Global South. We're really excited about the Earth System Governance Journal. It's only quite new, but it recently attained a Q1 factor, so it's great timing for the special issue. And I encourage anyone who is interested today, scholars, to submit to this special issue when it's launched, the open call in October. I will hand over this now to our moderator, Jose Maria Valenzuela. Jose will introduce the speakers, and we're really lucky to have him today. He comes from the Institute for Science, Innovation and Society at the University of Oxford. He works on global and comparative studies on decarbonization and the governance of technological change. He's a postdoctoral researcher at the Institute, or INSIS, working on carbon removal governance. He's also an active member of Oxford Scenarios Programme and Oxford Martin Programme on Integrating Renewable Energy, and the Oxford Martin Programme on Post-Carbon Transition. He has most recently conducted comparative research on Europe, China, and Latin America electricity markets and the role of experts in increasing regulatory capacity. He holds a Doctor of Philosophy in Public Policy from the Blatnovic School of Government at Oxford University and is trained as an international politics scholar at El Colegio de Mexico and University of Chicago, as well as Tsinghua University. Finally, it's exciting to see he's really worked in interesting things outside of academia. Between 2011 and 2017, he worked for Mexico's Department of Energy, the World Wildlife Federation of Mexico on climate and renewable energy policy, and as a consultant for UNIDO, UNEP, and US National Renewable Energy Lab on institutional design for low carbon transitions in energy and industry. Well, I'll hand it over to you, Jose. Thank you so much for moderating today, and I'm really excited for a very interesting conversation.
Thank you. I am also excited about the panel that Cynthia has put together. Thank you all the attendees and the panel members for joining us today. I'll be very brief in presenting the authors. Maybe you're certainly gonna want to look for their research in Google Scholar later after listening to all of them. We are gonna have only 10 minutes for each presentation. After the presentations, we're gonna have a Q&A. I might make some initial questions, but hopefully we'll have a lot of questions from the panel so that we can skip directly into the attendees' questions themselves. So I'm going to present the panel members by order of appearance. I'll start by presenting Luigi Sortibran. Dr. Sortibran is the Director of Research and Postgraduate Studies at the Instituto de Estudios Superiores Rosario Castellanos in Mexico City. She holds a PhD in sustainability sciences, and for the last 4 years, she has involved in projects to strengthen the institution. I actually understand that the institution is kind of growing and gonna become a full university in the recent future. So if that's the case, congratulations. She's also a professor in the master's degree in climate change and biodiversity from the Institute, and participates in a number of research projects on both international and national academic groups in topics like distribution and abundance of biodiversity, mechanisms of coexistence in plant communities, networks of biotic interactions, and overall the effects of climate change and biodiversity. Then we're going to have the opportunity to listen from Dr. Judith Dominguez. Dr. Dominguez is a professor researcher at El Colegio de Mexico at the Center for Demographic, Urban, and Environmental Studies. She's also been recognized as a level 3, that is the top ordinary level within the national system of researchers in Mexico. She holds a PhD in law from the Autonomous University of Madrid, and her expertise, which is quite wide, includes politics, water law, water security, human rights related to water, environmental governance, and climate change. She's part also of important national and international networks, including collaborations with institutions in Europe. I'd like to stress that she is part of the monitoring group of water sector of the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources in Mexico, so also doing policy relevant work. And just to give a couple of examples of her most recent research, she recently published The Politics of Water through its institutions from 1917 to 2017. So that's 100 years of history of water governance in Mexico, or published by El Colegio de Mexico. And another recent publication, Sustainability, Technological Innovation, and Water Governance in Basins and Cities. After Dr. Dominguez, we'll hear from Eloisa Tosato. Eloisa is at the University of Sao Paulo. She specializes in evidence-based public policy evaluation, and her focus is on providing decision-making support in areas like climate change and biodiversity, particularly within the United Nations Convention. And I hope, as you can see right now in this third presentation, actually we have a panel that is very engaged in policy and decision-making. Dr. Tosato holds a PhD in geography from Université de Rennes. I hope I pronounced it well in French, in the north of France, in the city of Rennes. She also has a doctorate in environmental sciences from the University of Sao Paulo. And with this very rich background, she conducted also postdoctoral research at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, which is located in Italy. It's also famous to be a highly policy relevant research institution within Europe. Since 2017, she's been serving as consultant to the United Nations Development Program in Brazil in the many fields that I've already mentioned. She's also part of the Public Policy, Territoriality, and Society Research Group at the Institute of Advanced Studies at the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil. The work of Eloisa Sato, particularly her doctoral research, already received prizes or memorable, honorable mentions, both in Sao Paulo and in Rennes. Dr. Cynthia Molina, who we really thank for organizing the panel. I particularly thank her for inviting me as a moderator. She's a professor researcher associated to the Global Change and Sustainability Laboratory within the Instituto de Estudios Superiores, Rosario Castellanos. Her research has focused on climate governance in Central America and in general, the role of institutions in decarbonization in Latin America. Also, not only Central America, but also Mexico, where she has also done research on water security as part of the Center for Demographic, Urban, and Environmental Studies at the Colegio de Mexico. Cynthia Molina held a position of associate researcher at the energy program at the Colegio de Mexico, where I had the pleasure of meeting her for the first time as researcher. And her latest research focuses on decarbonization policy in Mexico and carbon dioxide removal in Central America. She's a member of the Earth System Governance. She's a research fellow of Earth System Governance and contributes to the recently created carbon removal working group within the ESG network. So just like at the start of the conversation, I'll just like to emphasize that if you haven't seen the Earth System Governance before, we really encourage you to look to continue looking. Just like Cynthia's collaboration has allowed us to have this conversation, there might be opportunities for future collaborations for others in this panel. So without further ado, and after presenting all our guests today, I'd like to ask Luigi to first present for no more than 10 minutes, please.
Thank you. Can you see the presentation?
We can see the presentation.
Okay.
If you can put it on slide view.
Okay.
I think it hasn't turned to slide view.
Oh, thank you. Hello, first to
sorry, Luigi, it hasn't changed to slide view. Can you try to do it again?
Okay.
That just below, next to the plus and minus sign. Yeah, that's.
I think.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Okay.
Not working, but maybe we can start listening to you, and maybe can we check if you can move the slide?
Next.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, we cannot see it. So maybe stop sharing and try again from scratch.
I don't know. already? And next layer? No.
So let's see if you can change the slide once more to see if it's at least working that way.
No?
I cannot see it. I'm not sure if Cynthia can see it or someone else is seeing the slide change.
No, it seems to be on the cover slide.
So if you can change your slides, can you send me this, and
Okay.
I will project. Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. No, don't
That's
worry.
okay. So what we can do then is to ask Dr. Dominguez to take the first seat, if that's okay, Judith, while we sort out the slides for Rugi.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah, great. Sorry to put you up
But I
front.
will try.
Yeah, fantastic. So then,
I have the same problem, but I will try. Oh,
hopefully, well, we'll see. I mean, we're all used to always
but
having these challenges with.
Can I put my presentation now? Because
Okay.
I'm seeing the previous one.
Yeah.
You have to stop.
So, okay.
Stop.
Yeah, now you should be able to do it.
Okay. Okay. Could you see my presentation? Can you see?
No, yet.
Yes? No? Cynthia, my presentation is on the screen.
I can see it now. Yes.
Okay. Okay, I
Good.
start.
Good.
Good afternoon and good morning in the Americas. Thanks so much for having me at this conference. I would like to speak about one dimension of climate governance, the financing of all those actions to adapt and mitigate climate change in Latin America and the Caribbean. Important changes in the geopolitical context are happening. We are heading for a warming of 2.8 degrees Celsius by the end of the century if we continue with current policies. And current commitments and investment will only reduce so far from 2.4 degrees to 2.6 degrees by the end of the century. Climate change is pushing a new Green Deal in a rapid changing geopolitical context. The European Union wants to become a global leader of the green transition, recovering the negotiation lost spaces in Latin America and the Caribbean, and create strategic alliances to promote a more ambitious agenda in the next international summits. The recent European CELAC summit was the commitment between the two regions. What is the role of Latin America in the global context? In the region, there are living 650 million people in 33 states. The emissions in Latin America represents a low percentage, only 10% of global emissions, but it is the second largest region affected by extreme events due to climate change. Land use change and deforestation are the main cause of their contribution to climate change and represent a local threat. The region 53% of global economic losses. The annual costs due to interruptions in energy and transportation infrastructure systems are equivalent to 1% of regional GDP and up to 2% in some Central American countries. By 2030, in the Latin America and the Caribbean region, there is a risk that 5.8 million people will fall into extreme poverty as a result of climate change, and by 2050, more than 70 million people could be forced to leave their homes to escape climate impacts. For these reasons, climate financing is one of the priority topics on the joint European CELAC agenda through the new global gateway financing instruments under the Team Europe approach that seeks to coordinate the efforts of the various partner countries towards key sectors, taking into account specific national circumstances and based on dialogue with partner countries. In the joint agenda signed at this summit, the two regions committed to accelerate the implementation of the loss and damage mechanism, anticipated $100 billion adopted in previous COPs, which is crucial for most vulnerable societies to climate change and that urgently require strengthen their resilience capacities, not only to avoid economic losses, but above all, to tackle social disasters such as climate migrations. Global Gateway in Latin America and the Caribbean. In the international arena, the European Union has redesigned the development aid scheme with new financing tools within the 2021-2027 multi-annual framework based on a joint European approach, Team Europe approach of all countries to deliver resources in a better way, in the long term in accordance with the European values and interests, to create local added value to economic growth, more jobs, and social cohesion. In bilateral or regional relations with Latin America and the Caribbean, the Global Gateway considers an investment of $45 billion by 2027 with more than 130 projects. In 2023, projects are contemplated in 15 countries in digital, climate and energy, transportation, health, education, and research. Specifically in Mexico, renewable energies, health systems, vaccine production, integrated water resources management, and the initiative of the 5 Great Forests of Mesoamerica. They are allies for the green transition. But two questions that remain are, has the region developed an institutional architecture or a climate governance scheme? In other words, is prepared to receive this climate investment and take advantage of them? Do we have a robust climate governance? A group of countries, Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, Chile, Argentina, and Panama, have legislation and institutions related to climate change beyond the environmental sector. In other less developed countries, however, it is necessary to strengthen their planning, management, and timely response capabilities in the face of the extreme effects caused by climate change because they are the most affected. In the latter, there are experiences supported by the cooperation agencies and development banks that implement measures and tools, but their positive effects are modest, being recipients of the solutions. On the other hand, several reports and governments from the Global South call for a reform of the financial mechanisms and instruments of development banks for faster and more sustained investment and to reformulate credit conditions, which was supported in the recent G20 declaration in New Delhi. A commission led by Nicholas Stern and others highlighted that annual investment in climate action must increase immediately and reach 1.5 and 2.4 trillion by 2030, tripling current investment, and the need to formulate more favorable credit conditions that encourage investment in public goods. In the recent G20 declaration, reforms were agreed upon for better, broader, and more effective multilateralism, in which multilateral development banks address global challenges, maximize their financing for development, empower less developed countries to allow them to grow continuously and sustainably and ensure the sustainability of many countries. Although there is an imperative need for more sustainable inversions, the starting point of view could be not the same to preserve the global commons and avoid emissions to a carbon neutral economy. In the global south, there is an ideological movement that proposes other ways of development that could perform the next global financial decisions. Top finances are called to be facilitators of climate actions, redesigning their traditional support of subsidy mechanisms to promote adaptation and mitigation efforts in a balanced way, with social inclusions and promoting strategic alliances with green criteria. For more effective action, it is necessary for the public and private sectors to align their investment. Today, all sectors and social actors are relevant. In conclusion, I can say that to accelerate the triple transition, green, digital, and social, developed countries must acquire a central role. And some countries in this region know it. I will end at this point. Thanks so much for your attention.
Thank you, Judith. You took 9 minutes, so we'll have to ask you some very difficult questions in the Q&A segment to give you more time to present. So again, thank you for this presentation. We'll go back to the presentation by Luigi.
Thank you. Hello, first of all, I would like to thank the organization of the event for the invitation, especially to Dr. Cynthia Molina for considering me in this important event. This webinar has great importance to academia in Latin America because it presents the opportunities and challenges of the climate governance based on the experience of our country considering nation and local condition this nation. Next slide, please. Thank you. The problem derived from climate change have become important use due to their potential devastating effect, loss of biodiversity, increase in temperature on the planet, problems in productive system, health, drought, etc. Next, universities in general. Next, in general, all sectors of academic play a key role in the science and execution of adaptation and mitigation measures for this problem. For the governments of Latin America, academia, and in general universities and research, their jobs in the explain the consequence of climate change and its adverse effects and propose mitigation, adaptation strategies with a comprehensive approach that think not only about the social aspect, but also economic and environment. In higher education, today institutions are facing a number of challenges, including the challenges to create future-proof graduates. Higher education institutions have particular mandate to develop future leaders and decision makers capable of understand and providing solutions to complex global issues. Education programs that focus on multidisciplinary thinking are required to prepare future leaders to solve problems to yet cannot to be problem. Next. The United Nations Framework Convention on Climatic Change prioritizes 6 key areas of activity: education, training public awareness, public access to information, public participation, and international cooperation. These 6 areas for action will be supported primarily through various layers of government tasked with direction and supporting education start provision. Public goods and service in non-formal and informal education sectors. And last but not least, voluntary action. However, has not been addressed and reminded that must be considered. Change, please. The academy Latin America begin to respond positively in this need through change in the teacher content, the redefinition of access of the technology and lines of research, great dissemination, and more links with society and decision makers at different levels of government. Next. For example, next, please. For example, in the case of Mexico, the federal and state governments have incorporated into the work plans strategies for mitigation, adaptation, and climate change, involving various sectors. To mention a few, promoting the use of bicycle, and for this, they have modified streets with a land for the circulation, rental, and land and the bicycle in different parts of the city that can be connected with electric transport and low levels of greenhouse gas emission. The construction of gardens and parks to increasing plant coverage, decrease conservation, solve for the protection, water separation, and clean energy alternatives, etc. In this way, it integrates multiple actors: public, private, communities, indigenous people, and academia at different levels at decision market. Next. I also want to talk about the Rosario Castellanos University, a project of the government of Mexico City. It's a public and free university that was recently created. However, it already has 23 bachelor degrees and 15 graduate programs that seek to train professionals who can be solutions to different problems. For example, it has 3 degrees that study socio-environmental problems and the implementation of projects for the use natural resource, care of ecosystem, the prevention of environment disaster, and sustainable development. Degrees are environment science for urban areas, urban planning and community development, and economic and sustainable development. At the postgrad level, there is master degree in climate change and biodiversity, food security and sovereignty, and doctorate in sustainability science. However, several programs contemplate lines of research related to the search for social and environment solutions, environment education, environment management, water as social environment conflicts. The education model allows from the first semester to apply knowledge the search for solution, starting with real problems and scenarios. Next. In addition, the Rosario Castellanos University has researched a postgraduate center in humanities, science, and technology, organized in 5 laboratories, such as the Laboratory in Global Change and Sustainability Development, which seek the generation of knowledge, dissemination, and like it with other communities to create collaboration networks. For example, in communities south of Mexico City, East residents expressing their social environment problems, and working groups were organized with research, studying, community authorities, and businessmen from the region to define projects that provide solutions to their problems. In this way, the university is like its society and social responsibility and for its line of action. Next, please. There I consider a great importance for the academic links, more what community and other sectors in the search for solution and climatic change. Next. Next. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sortibran. I'm impressed with our panelists today. They have been incredibly disciplined in the time allocated. We'll come back with some questions. I'm pretty sure the panel will have. I have my own questions about the opportunity of these new generation universities in sustainability. But we'll move to listen first to Dr. Eloisa Tosato from Brazil. If you can share your screen.
Sure.
We're ready to listen to you.
Okay, it's good for you. I just.
We can see PowerPoint. Can you share on slide view? Slide share?
Yeah.
The presentation?
It's good for you?
Perfect. We can see it.
Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Eloisa. I'm from Brazil. I work at IEA in USP, University of São Paulo. I would like to thank you for the invitation to participate in this seminar, which brings reflections on climate governance in Latin America. I think it's an important conversation for academia, but also for the applied research to guide management. So today I would like to bring to you some opportunities and challenges for climate governance. So we will talk a little bit about some reflections in Brazil, okay? So, well, we will talk about the environmental crisis as a humanitarian crisis. So we need to, when we talk about social and climate governance, we need to talk a little bit about social environmental implications in Brazil, also about our NDC, right? So we will see some considerations about the Brazilian NDC, the role of the private sector. And to finish, we will discuss, I bring here some key points to discuss with you, but I think that the most important that we could use at this moment about climate governance in Brazil, it would be the post climate policy that privileges specialized knowledge and technocratic management. Okay, so we will talk a little bit about that. So here it's to show you a little bit about the environmental crisis. Here we have socio-environmental implications in Brazil. You can see that we have vulnerable populations. So our vulnerable population is of 70 million individuals in social poverty and 14 million in extreme poverty. We have precarious housing, unemployment, low education, illness. We have also waterborne disease, insects and venomous animals, floods, inequality sanitary conditions, and all of that, saying that in Brazil, actually, we have 50% of the Brazilian population that don't have access to basic sanitarium. And this will determine any opportunity for individual rupture with this social condition. And we know also that the population of Black or brown color or race is more present in informality. They have also fewer years of education. They are they have less payment, and this contributes to the lower income from work. So 73% of the country's poor are Black and brown. So when we are talking about climate governance in Brazil, we have to consider this data. Here it's due to show you that we have all these data in this Atlas Águas and Atlas Esgotos from our government, and we have a new law about this sanitation in Brazil, but also it's to show you that it's 2020. So let me find this next one. And besides poverty, we have to also say a little bit about that we have laws, programs, and public policies for the environment and reducing poverty, hunger, and social exclusion. But we have a lot of, despite from governments that will bring this rupture in our Brazilian management system. So here, some examples of the degradation of landscape. We have deforestation in biomes, fires, illegal mining, water pollution, indigenous species, disaster tragedy, loss of life, and the local economic slowdown. And we have also the vulnerability of original people. So this figure just shows you the total annual emission in Brazil of CO2 by sector. As you can see in yellow, the agriculture sector, and green, and the deforestation are the two most important sectors of emission of CO2 in the country. Here you can see when we are talking about deforestation, this is to show you the action plan for prevention and control of deforestation in the legal Amazon, our PPCDAN. So you can see PPCDAN's action in reducing deforestation and reducing emissions, especially from 2004 to 2013. And we have to say that during this period, PPCDAN, the governance of PPCDAN was the civil house. In other words, it was in the presidency, directly in the presidency of the Republic of Brazil. So we know that during this period, when PPCDAN was, her governance was with the civil house, we had also the most effective reducing of deforestation and emissions of CO2. So PPCDAN has 4 axes. They work with sustainable productive activities, environmental monitoring and control, land and territorial planning, and normative and economic instruments. And PPCDAN was being executed from 2004 to 2019. During the Bolsonaro government, it was, the PPCDAN was cutted, and now during this government, Lula returned with PPCDAN, and we have a goal to deforestation zero until 2030. So in this figure, you can see that from May 2003, when the PPCDAN was launched, we had an increase in fines, embargoes, and seizures by IBAMA and ICMBio. We had also the remote embargo of on land use and in illegality deforestation area. We had also the cancellation of CAR in indigenous land conservation units and public forests. And you can see that during these new months of PPCDAN, we had already a reducing of the deforestation in Amazon, level Amazon. Besides PPCDAN, this government launched two National Monetary Council resolution about bonds and restrictions concerning land use too. Well, we talked a little bit about the deforestation sector. The other sector that's very important for Brazil is the agriculture, and here and cattle. So here you can see the institutional mapping of Brazilian policies on agriculture and cattle too. And you can see that Brazil has various agricultural policy instruments, but even with that, the emission from this sector have always continued to increase in the country. So in 2022, we had also the National Program for Reducing Methane from Organic Waste, the Zero Methane program. This program has the objective of reduction of methane emissions, sustainable use of biogas and biomethane as renewable source of energy and fuel, to promote sectoral agreements aimed to the sustainable use of biogas and biomethane and the reduction of methane emissions. But it has the limitation that this plan do not dialogue with methane emissions from enteric fermentation. That's also, it's near 92% of the methane emissions in Brazil is from the agricultural sector and come from enteric fermentation of cattle. When we discuss about enteric fermentation of cattle in Brazil, we must discuss about the carbon neutral and low carbon meat protocols. Brazil is a pioneer in the production of certified meat with focus on carbon neutralization. And you can see here that we have the ELPF system. And so we could have carbon neutral meat or carbon low emission meat. It's a system, a protocol from Embrapa. And but here we are talking about scope 1. And we have some challenges to this system gain scale. And even with that, having PPC done and Embrapa's protocol, it's also important to say when we are talking about governance in Brazil, that during the scientific technical work to evaluate the the national climate change policy, we did that on Federal Senate in 2019. It became clear that Brazil's ambition to reduce emission was always low, and that it could have been achieved only with the PPC. So here you can see that during the Bolsonaro government, there was a greater reduction on this ambition too. And we also
Eloisa,
discussed. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, but we are running slightly late, so you're gonna have to wrap up.
Okay. It's just to finish the role of the private sector in Brazil. So in the total of 8.5 million kilometers, we have 44% of private land. So it's very important when we talk about private land and also urban challenges, the action plan of responsible business conduct. It's to map and provide a more coherence to public policies and responsible business conduct. And finishing here is just bringing these key points regarding opportunities and challenges of climate governance in Brazil. So we talked about social environment conditions, history of scarce resource of execution, monitoring, and inspection of environmental policy. And here, just to finish, I would like to talk to you about the importance of this system and the post-climate policy that privileges specialized knowledge and technocratic management. So if we are talking about governance of climate in Brazil, we have also to talk about this. So many thanks. Finishing, Jose.
Thank you, Eloisa. I think you finished with a super interesting point, so we'll come back to this. Okay. Let me give the microphone to Cynthia.
Thank you so much. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Yes, okay. Good afternoon and good morning to everyone. I will talk about the role of economic instruments in Central America's climate governance. And my presentation is divided in 4 parts. Firstly, I provide a brief of the climate governance. Secondly, I expose about some economic mitigations instruments in the region. Thirdly, I will review recent changes in the legal and institutional framework in Central America. And finally, I will conclude this presentation. So, taking into account background, the promotion of climate change agenda involves all nations. And I refer to climate governance as the decision-making process at different levels. So in this case, all mechanisms, instruments, and regulations that help it to define it must be considered. This process requires the participations of all nations, no matter if they are big or small economies. So the Central American countries as non-Annex I countries have participated in the signing of international agreements, and they have participated in the Conference of the Parties and signed the United Nations Framework Conventions on Climate Change, the Kyoto Protocol, and the Paris Agreement. The commitments made in these agreements promote change in the way that the governments face the climate change. So one of the policies that governments in the region have taken is related to mitigation instruments. In the past, they were assumed by developing countries, but today, developed and developing countries are progressing to reduce their emissions. Under these conditions, it's relevant to ask about the importance of these documents, because they play an important role to achieve a change in how we address multi-level climate governance. Greenhouse gas mitigations instruments play an important role in this purpose, because some of them are based on a cost efficiency principle, and that's mean making possible agreements between two actors through a win-win exchange. These instruments have guidelines, directives, and procedures that defined by the international agreements. As you can see in this graphic, for example, United Nations Framework Convention and Kyoto Protocol and Paris Agreement have the specific mechanisms to do or to reach to reduce the emissions in different countries. This is at international level, but what happened in national level? As you can see in this graphic, at national level, all the countries will need regulations, funding, evaluations, legal framework, institutional arrangements, planning, and public policies and instruments. But are they really reach these all institutional arrangements? In these mechanisms, they need to adapt their national conditions to implement and develop projects under these instruments. Some of these adjustments include public policies, as I say before, and made modifications to their institutional and legal frameworks. So focus in Central America. As you can see in this graphic, you can see that 6 countries have signed international and regional agreements. But when we focus on at the national level, we can see that only 5 have signed national policy documents, and the legal framework just only El Salvador and Guatemala have a specific legislation to climate change and sustainable development, as you can see in the next slides. These slides, in this table, you can see what the reforms that this country made in the context of sustainable development and climate change. This is important to say that under all the decisions that these countries take, there is economic motivations. So these economic motivations before maybe could be disrupt the international or the climate governance network. And as mentioned before, only El Salvador and Guatemala have legislation of sustainable development and climate change. One of the another motivation to these countries to participate in these projects are reforms to attract foreign investment in the energy industry. So we can see that there's an economic motivations and purpose to attract foreign investment in the energy industry is more, I think that it's more important that have a legislation on a specific topic on climate change. So just for example, I would like to present these net benefits of the clean development mechanisms. This was an assess of 17 central hydroelectrical power plants under the clean development mechanisms during the first period of Kyoto Protocol. And as you can see, the net benefits in environmental aspects are negative. So what can we do to avoid these results? We need to improve or build a robust climate governance network to avoid these results. Because the absence of climate governance architecture demonstrates that anticipate in benefits from mitigations instruments such as CDM, the Clean Development Mechanisms, are lower than expected. The graphics present, as said before, a multi-criteria analysis that assessed 17 hydroelectric power plants. As you can see, the environmental net benefits are negative. So, taking into account the slides above, I will end considering an interview with actors in the region. We can identify opportunities and barriers to developing climate change governance from architectural perspective. In the case of opportunities, there is an interest in promoting a mitigation agenda at the regional level. And due to the absence of big funds to financial these projects, the regional financing funds become relevant. But what happened with barriers? So there's a knowledge gap. In some cases, some actors mentioned that there's no enough knowledge about the technologies or the process that they can do to develop a project, and there's a limited resource. So in this case, the countries in Central America need to assistance and funding for other countries. In this case, international cooperation is very, very important. So they mentioned that there's a percent of a company to develop these projects and to understand the conditions of these instruments at international level. And at national level, governments are prioritize the economic growth. So to finally, I would like to mention some conclusions. They are not the end, but I would like to say that economic mitigations instruments serve the short and medium term priorities of the host country more than its long-term sustainable development needs, and economic progress stands out among the priorities. Due to lack the information, the mitigation projects were not as good alternatives as that were possible. As we can see in the graphic, the environmental benefits were negative. And the absence of a legal framework which national institutional architecture fragments multi-level climate governance network. So this is only 3 conclusions, but I open to your questions, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you to all the panelists. We're running a little bit behind, so please start preparing your questions, raising your hand, while the audience starts to get into raising some questions to each one of you. I'd like to make raise one issue that I see in common to other presentations, and maybe make some quick questions to each one of you on this. Within the Earth system governance, one of the themes that's included across the research program of the whole network is democracy, and the importance of democracy for the governance, environmental governance, and democracy in a very broad sense, not only kind of in the electoral sense, but kind of in a broad sense of participation. And I see this in different levels, and I'd like to hear from you whether you can point at one of the priorities which you think that these more democratic, more inclusive institutions might result to. So, for example, let me start with Luigi and say, like, you've talked about this new institution, this new education institution that you are helping lead, that it's being inclusive of new more population on their scheme of free education. What are the priorities of these students that you're receiving? Like, what does a university that is inclusive sees in the students that the university is receiving? Before you reply, I'll actually do the 4 questions to the 4 of you, and then in case you want to comment on any other. So, Judy, I think you presented us kind of a completely different level of analysis, international, national, regional, and you did mention that global South countries and societies are kind of asking for new roles and new forms of decision making. And I'd like you to, maybe you can give us one example, maybe within your area of work on water and human rights, where you think, let's say, international financing would work differently if it was guided by the priorities of the recipient countries. Eloisa, I think you presented some really interesting cases of, let's say, Brazilian institutional and technical innovation. That's pretty interesting. But you also presented us with a really kind of frightening problem that we all know or face, which is the depoliticization of environmental governance, right? So what do you think the kind of Lula government and Lula's more populist in a kind of general descriptive sense, not in a negative sense, represents for reactivating forms of political participation regarding environmental governance? And Cynthia, maybe you can tell us something like that in the case of Central America, because you told us the story that Central American governments or institutions are very much willing to develop these regional climate action perspectives and agendas, and the ambition is there, maybe not being matched with sufficient funding and technical support and just political support from other countries. But what about Central American societies? Where do you see the strength of kind of the climate push within subnational institutions? Maybe it's universities, maybe it's civil society, maybe it's, I don't know, the church. Who would you say kind of it's a climate champion within the Latin American societies? So yeah, so let's you can do we have already questions in the people raising their hand? Not yet. So then let's go and try to make a comment based on the question that I made for, let's say, 1 minute, and then we can hear from questions from the audience. So Luigi, do you want to start?
Yes. In the university, the students are interested in addressing the problems of Mexico City, and mainly the problems of water management, the pollution, the loss of biodiversity, and how this affects agriculture. The students want to find solution to the problems in their locality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's super interesting, because we wouldn't associate Mexico City as a multi-million metropolis inhabitants where agriculture would be a priority. But it's clearly what a more inclusive university shows that there's these priorities in there. Okay, thank you.
In the university, young people and not young people see a window of opportunity to study at a free university and study bachelor degrees or a postgraduate degree, and that will help some of the problems the your community. In addition, is allow them they have links with the different sectors because it's intent that had participation in the community with the business sector, the governments, etc., etc.
Thank you, Luigi. Judith, do you have a comment on?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah. So I'd like you to give us an example of what would we see different if the recipient countries or global South countries had more power in decision making over, let's say, multilateral financial institutions.
Well, yeah.
So please go ahead.
Well, I think there are many good examples of in the field of water, in the water creating capacities in the institutions and also in the communities. I am thinking about the Spanish cooperation in Latin America from many decades ago. It's continuing building capacities, developing projects, and all of these have the climate change dimension. And also we can find there are successful examples in the transport sector. The challenge, in my opinion, remains in the new issues that interest to the developed countries, such as critical minerals, renewable energies, ocean global commons, and not only for the investment, also for the construction of the concepts and a common problem and a common solution. I think nowadays we see different perspectives and a gap in these different perspectives. The developed countries have a point of view, and this I think different in the beginning. From other group of countries, no? Meaning the South, meaning the global South, who belongs the global common, such as oceans, the Amazonia, and the European countries or the developed countries say it's public or global common goods. But for some countries, there are not global common goods. They are mine. Lula is, I think, it's an example of saying this, no? And I think has a bit of reason on his schools.
Yeah, thank you, Judith. I think there's this common thread coming out about capacity development at different levels, from the students to the institutions. So I guess this is the right moment for Eloisa to come in, either comment on the question that I made or maybe follow up from Judith's reference to Brazil. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, sure. In Brazil, we returned to democracy with the Lula government. But we have to pay attention to whether there will be structural changes that will actually bring about a reduction in vulnerability in the country. So this year we had the Amazon Summit among the OECD countries. I think that you saw that. And various sectors of society participated, and we needed now to see if these contributions will be effectively resumed in the coming years. We know that in Brazil, for example, the technological change in clean energy affect communities, like the wind industry in the northeastern of Brazil. So we have to pay attention on how this will be really implemented in the country.
You bring into a kind of regional dimension and the multiple voices that have to be coordinated in that particular super important region, which is the Amazon. So Cynthia, you presented from a like regional perspective. Maybe you want to follow up on Eloisa's comment on the challenge of having these at least tacit agreements on common effort, but the problems of actually making it happen. Or you can answer the question that I made, whichever you want.
Okay, about the question you made, at national level, I think that the private actors play an important role to develop the projects and to carry out the investments because they have the money. But the academy, for example, are carry out research on these new technologies, but they mention that there is not enough knowledge about the new technology, so they have or they need to companion from the other countries, especially developed countries. And the governments at national level, they are not playing an active role. So we cannot, the absence or organisms or regulator institutions. These situations make that the benefit expected from these projects are less. And so, or in the case that I studied, negatives. So the government needs to more be involved in this dynamic of climate governance, because the big pictures at national level in some countries are shown as a Central American fragment or disrupt with the international agreements and the purpose of the climate international policy and governance.
Thank you, Cynthia. So let's Eloisa, do you want to comment on this?
Yes, I would like to comment on what Cynthia said, because I think that you were saying about the questions of the research when we are talking about climate governance in the Amazon. There is a question for me that it's about the GCF projects in the Pan-Amazonia. So when we are talking about the post-climate policy that privileges knowledge and technocratic management, I really would like to know if these GCF projects in Pan-Amazonia are in this system, a post-climate system, or if they really bring us some chance for community and vulnerable people, indigenous people. And so it's a question of research, in fact, related to what Cynthia bring to us.
Yeah, I think this is a super interesting topic, because the Green Climate Fund was created as an alternative to the World Bank system of climate financing, right? And it's supposed to be much more inclusive of the voices of recipient countries. So definitely a great topic to research for the panel members or for other people listening to us. Maybe there's someone with expertise actually within the audience. If you want to make a comment in the chat about this point made by Eloisa, or if anyone wants to suggest some reading about this, very much welcome. We still have about 10 minutes to continue to hear from the audience if you have any questions. I can definitely continue with my own comments, but also maybe the panel, if there's any other comment that you want to make on any of your panelist colleagues' presentations, please go ahead. But I'd like to hear from I mean, all the panelists, whoever has an opinion on this. Latin America is a region with a lot of diversity, and one of these diversities includes the different sizes of countries, and the kind of pull, the gravitational pull of certain large countries like Brazil or Mexico towards its immediate neighbors, and that can be observed in education system. People from, let's say, Central America taking opportunities to study in Mexico, or people from like Brazilian institutions, research institutions are obviously impressive and they have so much capabilities. But also in terms of cooperation, Mexico, for example, developed this program on reforestation or productive reforestation in Central America. So I don't know if any one of you has any thoughts about the problematizing our own hierarchies within the region, right? Like we usually talk about the differences between Latin America and Europe or the United States, but we also have our own hierarchies and inequalities. Does anyone have any comment on that? I mean, this might be a problematic, but also opportunity, I guess, but I'll love to hear from you.
Well, may I?
Yeah, please, Judith.
I don't think that is a problem. I think this is another kind of cooperation between South and South, and it's called triangular cooperation, horizontal cooperation, and not hierarchical. Not I don't think Mexico has its own agency or to cooperate with Central America mainly, but also Peru, Bolivia, and I think we share cultural values and cultural points of view in common. And it's easier to implement some solutions and to develop capacities in other countries that doesn't have it, no? And in my opinion, that is not a problem, no? That some countries in the South, in this region specifically, help others, or in other occasions, they are the channel to other inversions from Europe inversions, as an example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so yeah. So this is, I mean, I'm glad that you responded with such a positive take. My understanding is that this could be like, for example, the Amazon Summit should be the right platform for other extra-regional participants to collaborate with the region, right? It's not necessarily bilateral, but trilateral in the sense that there's already this platform being created within the region that can be used. Okay, yeah, that's a very well taken point. Any other thoughts on this, Eloisa? Have you had any comment on the? Yeah. Good. So let's give a final opportunity to the audience to raise any comment or question. Okay, I'm gonna start closing the dialogue by doing a very brief summary of some points that I think are really resonate with the Air System Governance Program. And there's this combination of topics regarding voice and autonomy. On the first point, I mean, Judith started. Sorry, I've said your name as if it was in English. Judith, it's Judith. Judith, I'm sorry. You started your presentation talking about this need for different voices, but also more autonomy to decide on the direction of development. And I think this seems to be a common thread throughout the presentations, both the need to maintain or increase the level of voice and autonomy in the paths that countries or societies takes on climate action. I think a key point on this is Eloisa's call to do concrete research on specific instances where we should be seeing change and where we don't know if change has happened, like the Green Climate Fund and the Green Climate Fund investments in the Amazon, or in other projects. I know there's a very interesting project that's being designed by Mexican authorities with the Green Climate Fund on recarbonization of soils and agriculture. Maybe that's something where Lugi can take a look and do empirical research on the subject. And then I think the final point that I take from the conversation is the idea that within capacity development, which is a topic that's been around for decades, what seems to be interesting about Latin America is that there's really good platforms of capacity development opportunities through trilateral cooperation or South-South cooperation. So this is the final message that I get from Judith. It's not only that there's a need for capacity development, which actually everyone highlighted, but that in Latin America, there's good experiences of South-South cooperation within the region that could also be turned into trilateral cooperation schemes that not necessarily reproduce other forms of hierarchy that we might not want to reproduce. So with that said, I'd like to thank all the participants. If anyone wants to make a final comment, this is your moment before we close the session. Raise your hand. If not, then I'd like to thank Jane and all the team within the Air System Governance for having us in this panel. Thank you, Cynthia, for organizing and for inviting me as a moderator. I really enjoyed the conversation. Jen?
Yeah, I would also just like to say on behalf of the Air System Governance Project, thank you very much for your presentations today. If people are interested further, I really encourage the audience or speakers to become involved, become research fellows for these types of dialogues to continue. They're extremely valuable from a global perspective. So yeah, thank you very much, and thank you, Jose, for moderating. And finally, thank you to Camille Thibault, who set up quite a lot of the logistics of today.